Welcome to the sixth and final deconstruction of Jordan Peterson's 2017 biblical series, where I will examine Peterson's claims about his own definition of what an atheist is and the red herring of explicit depravity. As laid out in Part 5, Peterson defines atheists as immoral psychopaths who reject all societal values. In this clip, he elaborates on why people who self-identify as atheists are really not.
And that's exactly what I do.
What I said at the beginning is that the atheist types act out a religious structure and criticize it.
No, there's no religious structure. We come to this big question now.
Let me get to this question, because
yes,
I did want to get to this, because you have a fascinating part in your book, Jordan, where you do say this. You're simply not addressing atheists. You say you're simply not an atheist in your actions, and it is your actions.
Or if you are, look out.
And it is your actions that most accurately reflect your religious beliefs. What do you mean by that? Why are you saying that no one is really an atheist deep down?
I didn't say no one was.
Okay.
I said that most of the people who claim to be atheists aren't. So this is why I like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, because Raskolnikov tried to act like an atheist, right? He took the ideas that were floating around, Dostoevsky took the ideas that were floating around in the late 1800s, which are still the ideas that we're discussing today. One most fundamental idea, I suppose, being after Nietzsche's announcement of the death of God, that if there is no God, then anything is permitted. That was Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov's the criminal in Crime and Punishment, the murderer. He gets away with his murder, technically, but not psychologically. And he decides that if there's no God, anything is permitted.
But
and
this
he can't
doesn't
see
have
a reason.
to be true. That's a person in a character in a novel. I don't think that that's so.
As Blackmore points out, what's in a story isn't true in real life, and atheists are not running around claiming, if there is no God, then anything is permitted. Given that atheists are already considered untrustworthy by many in the general public, especially among older cohorts as seen in this graph from Pew Research, Matt Dillahunty reinforces this perception, stating,
"The mindset of what people have about what an atheist is has been poisoned by religious proclamations. We have been denigrated from the pulpit, and it has seeped into every aspect of culture, right up to the height of intellectual pursuits. And it's time for that to end."
As Dillahunty points out, the view of atheists is already low, and it is highly irresponsible of Peterson to use his large social media following to further fuel this perspective with his distorted assertions, which link atheists with totalitarian psychopaths. At odds with his warnings about the abandonment of Christian values leading to social anarchy are the statistics demonstrating that the least religious countries are also the happiest, as these graphs from Pew Research and the UN World Happiness Report show, and two of Peterson's colleagues also disagree with his pessimistic outlook on the declining faith and what it bodes for the world. Peterson seems to assume that the only alternatives to religious morality are totalitarian atrocities or despondent nihilism. The correlation is clear and strong. The more secular tend to fare better than the more religious on a vast host of measures, including homicide and violent crime rates, poverty rates, obesity and diabetes rates, child abuse rates, educational attainment levels, income levels, unemployment rates, rates of sexually transmitted diseases and teen pregnancy, etc. Peterson's despondent nihilism appears in an exchange on the Unbelievable episode with Susan Blackmore, where he continued to peddle his nihilistic outlook.
Nothing matters. It's all empty and meaningless. This is how the world is. Get used to it. Get on with it, girl.
That sounds like a very Zen Buddhist way of dealing.
I guess it is.
Meaning.
Well, it's a paradoxical way, though. Because
It is kind of paradoxical.
The first part of that is nihilistic, and the second part isn't. So how do you reconcile those two things?
This outlook is only nihilistic from a Nietzschean perspective, which Peterson admittedly is, but Blackmore is clearly using this phrase in the Buddhist way, and even the host commented on this fact. The Buddhist meaning, from the Heart Sutra, is in no way nihilist, but freeing and uplifting. However, Peterson completely ignores her and the host about the context of her meaning and pushes on with his own nihilistic interpretation. Once again, it reveals Peterson's true agenda to peddle a godly agenda when he ignores the obvious, even when it is presented to him by two people, and on Christian radio of all places. Peterson is worried adamant anti-religious thinkers, as he referred to them in the clip from my first episode, are not just rejecting the religious texts, but that they have abandoned our immersement in the underlying dream that emerged from our psyches, and thus putting basic moral values at risk. His series is based on the psychological significance of the moral of the story, that's contained in the Bible if we ignore the not-so-moral bits, and so he tells us to keep that accumulated wisdom. The problem is that people who believe in the Bible do not understand these stories in the metaphorical way that Peterson feels is important. However, the world can safely dispense with the Bible and all its collective baggage and not wind up in a dystopian hell on earth. As the atheist mantra goes, we are good without God. Throughout his series, Peterson makes strategic omissions of the actual contextual origins of many of the stories so that he can apply his own heavily Christianized psychological significance. Further, he never declares his Jungian Gnosticism anywhere in the series. Other commentators have noted both the futility of his modern psychological layering and his Gnostic messaging, as Peterson evidently tries to hoodwink his biblically illiterate audience with his word salad. However, as shown in Episode 4 in his podcast with Steven Pinker, Peterson contradicted the nihilism he demonstrates in his biblical series and admitted the world is so staggeringly much better. In a series of Pangburn talks with Sam Harris and Douglas Murray, Peterson makes several admissions such as, we're all stupid, and so they need the stories in the vessel, that people should be accountable to God, and that in his analysis of religious texts, I don't presume that I understand them and how they came together.
It may also be that since we don't have very many vessels, that cracked and damaged and sometimes transparent as they are, what vessels you have might be worth holding on to.
Well, no, I think the challenge here is, it feels that, well, first of all, we should first notice that these comments very often take the form of, you and I don't need this stuff, but most other people do, right? And that is, it can do that, yeah. Yes, that's inevitably, and it sort of took that form at one moment the other night, where you acknowledge that people of low intelligence are best placed in a conservative paradigm, a traditionally conservative paradigm, because there's less to think through, right? Now, obviously, you don't want your view on religion summarized by, it's good for stupid people.
Well, I do want it summarized to some degree that way, because one of the things we do...
I'm giving you the opportunity again to put this foot in your mouth.
But I would say not only... the thing is that we're all stupid, and some of us are far stupider than others. But I have been very careful in my analysis of the relationship between the idea of sovereignty and the idea of religious belief. And one of the things that I have worked out, I think, partly from reading such people as Eliade and Jung, was that there is an emergent idea of sovereignty that does involve being accountable to a God. And the thing that's so important about this, that's so absolutely crucially important, is that it established the principle that even if you were at the top of a hierarchy, you weren't absolute. There was something above you that you were subordinate to. And one of the extraordinarily useful ideas about the abstraction of even God as a personified spirit, let's say, is that it allows every leader to be subordinate to something that's beyond him. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be misused, but it's a very, very, very important idea.
Yeah, except you can get there the other way around. You can realize that even if you're at the top of the hierarchy, you are radically dependent on everyone else.
Right, I'm going to try a little direct God smuggling. We won't bother with Jesus. Let's go right to God. Why not? So one of the things I've really tried to do when I've been analyzing religious texts is to take them seriously, in the sense that I don't presume that I understand them, and I presume that they're a mystery of sorts. And at least the Bible, for example, is a mystery because we don't really understand the processes by which it was constructed, and we don't understand the processes by which we all agreed collectively over several thousand years to organize the book the way it is organized, or to edit it the way that it's edited, and to keep what's in it and to discard what's not in it, and why it's lasted and why it's had such a huge impact.
So, if by his own admission, Peterson doesn't really understand the Bible, its stories, composition, and editing, perhaps he should have refrained from hosting lectures to present what I have shown he clearly had no intention of presenting honestly. His series was a pretext for God smuggling his own Gnostic Christian message that we must be accountable to God or face a dystopian world where people can do whatever they want if they forget the intrinsic value of others. A world which he admits to others capable of refuting his despondent nihilism is actually getting better with secularism. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to get notified of new videos. Please also consider supporting my work by becoming a Patreon sponsor. You can also find me on the following platforms: